Everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're at 330 beautiful people with us today. I'm just so grateful to be with you. We've got a great, wonderful friend and colleague and collaborator presenting today. I know that this is open to the public, this webinar. We had, well over 1,000 people register. So just so glad, Marsha, to see so much interest. This is our homepage at the Institute. And I just want to invite everyone who's not a member to join us. We are largely a philanthropic organization. We basically take money from our members, making donations to support coaching science and coaching research to continue to grow the integrity of the field. And that's how we're funded. It's all of you helping us in those small ways and making a donation. I also want to just note that we are sadly not in person, but our annual Institute of Coaching, McLean and Harvard Medical School Conference is available. It's coming in the fall. It'll be a virtual format. It'll be 3 half days, roughly 10 o'clock to 2:30 Eastern time. We have a fabulous lineup as always. So please join us. And if you're a member, you get a discount. So that's another reason to join. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce Marsha Hughes-Rease, who, like most of us in coaching, have a unique combination of backgrounds to bring to this important space. And in Marsha's case, in fact, Marsha, I was just asking you about the meaning of your coaching and consulting company, Quo Vadis. And it is, where are you going? Or whither goest thou? So that's kind of a cool question for us all to consider. Where are we going, especially right now as we're emerging from the pandemic? Marsha combines graduate work in organizational development as well as nursing administration, which is basically nursing leadership. So basically leadership and OD and coaching. And all of that together, both leadership experience and coaching leaders across a number of sectors, brings her unique perspective. She's also an Institute of Coaching Fellow and a member of our esteemed Strategy Council at the Institute, adjunct faculty member at Georgetown University Institute for Transformational Leadership, another really great model, a guide for Chief, which is a network that connects and supports women leaders, and you've written a number of book chapters and articles. So without further ado, Marsha, I'm here to support you. I will be jumping in when we've got some good questions. Don't forget, folks, if you've got questions, put them in the Q&A, not in the chat. The chat is for you guys all to hang out together and talk to each other, and then the Q&A is your questions, and then I'll be watching those and weaving them in as appropriate. So that's all from me. Over to you, Marsha.
Well, thanks, Margaret. I really appreciate IOC inviting me to talk about this topic. And it's one that, I have a great deal of passion around. And one of the reasons that I have this passion is because I think I have so many questions. And the questions really started this past summer, I should say last summer, when my supervisor, and I'm gonna give a call out to Catherine Wells, who's my coach supervisor, she saw my coaching model that I shared with her, and she says, Marsha, she says, that kind of reminds me of systemic coaching. And so I looked at her and I said, oh, really? And I said, tell me more. And she went on to explain to me about, Peter Hawkins and the seven-eyed model. And I became very, very interested. But what I realized when I looked at my model, how much it had been influenced by my OD background, that I just had melted, the two together. And so then I have spent this last year, kind of exploring how we can, as coaches, begin to really use the power of coaching as an OD intervention. So this is something that I have been pondering myself, and you're going to probably hear a lot of my ponderings during this time that we're together. And so a disclaimer right now, you are going to walk away with probably more questions and head scratching than you are going to be walking away with answers. And I'm hoping that, you know, your questions that you're going to put into the chat room will continue to help us to stay in this inquiry mode and to really, you know, kind of just live in those questions for a while, because that's what my coach supervisor really, I think, has taught me to do, is not to be so quick to answer the question as to live with it and just to kind of ponder with it. And so I'm kind of interested to see who's actually in the room. And so Sue, if you could, you know, kind of put up that poll so that we can get a sense of, you know, who's an OD practitioner, and that's external or internal, who's a coach, and like me, many of you may be both.
Just waiting for about 50 or so more people to respond.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like it has slowed down, so I am going to share the results.
Thanks. Okay, so we have about 13% of the folks are OD practitioners. About half of you, or a little over half, are coach, and a little less are both coach and OD practitioners. And so that's great. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm going to give just a little bit of background as far as OD is concerned, so that we're kind of on the same sheet of music in terms of understanding. But before I go there, one of the things, and I think that all of you are very much aware of this, is that we are we're in unprecedented times, you know, in terms of both coaching and consulting. And I like to think of it as kind of as an inflection point in both areas, because of what we have gone through this particular past year and continue to experience. You know, I was introduced to the term VOCA actually at an IOC conference. And so I just want to give another plug for the learnings that you can pick up at the conference. But I was actually introduced to this concept or term many years ago. And at the time, it was a concept. It really was. And I think that people were talking about it in terms of, yeah, we're living in the VOCA world now. However, I think that the year 2020 really and truly just blew up and really showed us what VOCA could actually look like. And so my colleague and I, Anna Maria Casas, when we're doing leadership development work, what we like to do is we like to introduce our participants, our leaders, our people managers to the term, but we also like to look at it more from the perspective of so what? So, okay, there is volatility. How can you turn that into a vision? There is uncertainty. How can you turn that into understanding? There is complexity. And how can we turn that into clarity or making sense of what's going on around us? And there is ambiguity. And how can we turn that into an agility? And so I think that my realization of the VOCA now has really changed tremendously since I was first exposed to the concept. So why don't we just explore a few definitions here so that folks have an idea about what I'm talking about. We have a lot of definitions in coaching, as you all well know. I mean, I personally, I have my own definition that I use when I'm putting in my bio, that I put in my bio, or that when I'm introducing myself to a potential client that I use. And so I think in the literature, I saw that there's like close to 30 different definitions, and I'm sure that there's more. But the ICF actually defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential, which is particularly important in today's uncertain and complex environment. And I don't know if the ICF kind of added that particular part to the definition or not, but it is really very, very relevant. In terms of organization development, this is kind of the classic definition of organization development. It's been around for a while, and as you can see, since this is one that Beckert introduced in 1969. And like coaching, there are a number of different definitions for organization development. And this classic one, it says it's an effort that is planned, organization-wide, managed from the top, increases organization effectiveness and health. And it's, we use planned interventions in the organization's processes using behavioral science knowledge. One of the reasons that I say it's planned, that it's classic, because, the world has changed, and we all know that change itself is not always from the top, that it's oftentimes emergent, and that it's unplanned. And that does not mean that you cannot still use OD methodology. And so a group of OD practitioners came together, and they called it the OD Gathering. And they came up with what is called the OD Gathering Report. And they were looking at the future of OD and the reality of the work of OD. And so one of the things that they did was they came up with what they thought was a more relevant definition. And they say it refers to the interdisciplinary field of scholars and practitioners who work collaboratively with organizations and communities to develop their system-wide capacity for effectiveness and vitality. It is grounded in the organization and social science. And what I love about this particular definition is that there's an implicit notion here that you're now going to really have scholars and practitioners working collaboratively. And I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily consider myself a scholar. I consider myself more of a practitioner, but I look to the scholars for the research. And I think that as a coach, we really and truly, need to be embracing the research that can come from our scholarly colleagues and then translating that into evidence-based practice. I also love the fact that they don't assume that OD practitioners are going to only be working in organizations. And I would suggest that as coaches, we are not just working in organizations, that if we are committed to improving what's going on around us, then we also have to look at communities as well. And so I think that OD embraces a number of the values that a lot of us as coaches hold dear. And that's, that whole notion of being humanistic, which means that, it's anchored in humanistic values. We look at it as being inquiry-based and collaborative, meaning that it's focused on designing processes that involve and engage as many stakeholders as possible. And it's also developmentally focused, meaning that it's to create a learning that yields a holistic development to shift to hopefully a higher level of understanding and maturation. Now, this is, as much as I love this definition, it is not one that I would use to explain OD to a potential client. And so this particular definition is one that I absolutely adore. And I use it when I have to put it in a proposal for a client. And I think the reason I like it is it's just so pragmatic. And it says it's the attempt to influence the members of an organization to expand their candidness with each other about their views of the organization and their experience in it, and to take greater responsibility for their own actions as organization members. The assumption behind organization development is that when people pursue both objectives simultaneously, they are likely to discover new ways of working together that they experience as more effective for achieving their own and their shared organizational goals. And when this does not happen, such activity helps them to understand why and to make meaningful choices about what to do in the light of this understanding. I absolutely think that this is such a beautiful way to look at organization development. And it's one that clients can understand. And so I oftentimes will use this particular definition. I borrowed it from Nielsen, and I will use this so that clients have a better idea that, you know something, this is an experiment. And it may not necessarily work what we're getting ready to do. But guess what? Like experiments, you learn. And then you pick yourself up and ask yourself, what did you learn? And what are you going to do next? So when we look at organization development, like coaching, organization development has been around a little bit longer than coaching. There are what are called the evolving waves of OD. And so that the first wave, or the first generation, is called the diagnostic organization development. And this refers to what many call the traditional OD approach, where you have a formal investigation, you collect objective data through different focus groups, interviews, surveys. I mean, it can be a long and drawn out approach. And then you make a diagnosis, and then you identify intervention strategies based upon that diagnosis and the goals of the client system. So this is really where OD started. Okay. And then it has moved into what we call the second generation OD, or I shouldn't say moved into, because the second generation of OD is actually building upon what I just said. As a matter of fact, at Georgetown, and I'm in their program, I'm adjunct faculty, we still use that first generation in terms of helping students to learn how to go in and collect data, to use that data to make sense and to help the client make sense of what's going on in their organization. And then the second generation of OD, which is, action learning or a learning organization, refers to the developmental methodologies that actually build on the action research from the first wave to create action science and learning organizations. And the core tenet of this particular second generation is to work with observable data to identify discrepancies between desired and actual behaviors and outcomes. And so that's kind of your gap analysis type of approach. And I have used that in organizations as well. And then there's this emerging, what I like to call it's called the third wave, but I would say it's the emerging, and it's called dialogic organization development. And it refers to OD practices, and it adds mindset anchored in an understanding of human systems as socially constructed. And for some of you out there who are into social social constructionism, like I am, this makes a lot of sense. Every interaction and conversation is part and parcel of creating change. And is characterized by change processes of emergence, generativity, and new narratives, which contribute to the desired transformational change outcomes. And I have to say that this is kind of where I landed up as far as an OD practitioner. And when I actually started practicing OD with Bannermill Tyson Associates, a small boutique consulting group out of Ann Arbor. This was our focus, was creating the opportunity for members of an organization to come together and have conversations. And through those conversations, to really be able to surface in real time feedback, and then use that to actually identify challenges, issues, and also come up with, okay, so what are we going to do next? What are we going to do about this? And so this is kind of where I have landed in terms of how I practice OD. So when we think about the evolving waves of coaching, are there any evolving waves of coaching that we need to be thinking about? And I'd be happy if you would kind of put some of that in the chat room, because it's kind of interesting that OD has kind of stepped back and taken this reflective look at itself. And I'm wondering if we are thinking about coaching and stepping back and taking a reflective look at ourselves. What do you all see? Margaret, do you see anything in the chat room, or do you have any thoughts, as a matter of fact, around what is perhaps evolving?
Thank you, Marsha, for a great start to a great presentation. I first want to just call out that there are people from 21 countries here.
Wow.
So just so you know, because I imagine that OD has it means different things. So Europe, Italy, Trinidad, Scotland, Brazil, India, UK, Costa Rica, Belgium, Pakistan, Greece, South Africa, Kenya, Canada, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, Germany, Singapore, Indonesia, and Mexico. Okay, so I think that really calls everyone who comes from another country just to weigh in around your experience of this topic, because we're clearly coming from a US or North America centric approach.
And thanks for pointing that out. Yes.
Yeah, there is a one question that's relevant right now, which is, does that third wave in OD incorporate the prior two, or does it break from the prior two?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it from my own perspective. And I think that it really builds on the prior two. I would not say that it breaks from. And one of the reasons is because, first of all, the values associated with organization development, and this goes way back to the late 40s, early 50s with Kurt Lewin, those are still dear to most OD practitioners in terms of that humanism that we bring, and also recognizing that surfacing what's going on in an organization one way or the other. And with the classic approach, or what was called the first wave, it was more formal. With the dialogic, it's much more just in time. And so I'm not saying that it really and truly is different. Now, the one thing that both Bush and Marsyk, who are kind of credited with coming up with this, one of the things that they would suggest is that dialogic OD needs a generative leader. And one of the reasons is because they think that, and I agree, that dialogic OD is best suited for addressing adaptive challenges. It's those challenges that, as Ron Heifetz has identified, that are kind of wicked. We don't know the answer to them. But if we bring in enough stakeholders and tap into that collective wisdom, that we're going to perhaps come up with an even better solution than by just going in and either one, coming up with our own answer to give to the client, or that the client only has a couple of people who are going to address this. And so tapping into that collective wisdom, and one of the ways that you can best do this is by orchestrating a space for that to happen. And so some folks have been involved probably in dialogic OD, and they didn't even know that that's what they were doing. Like it's World Cafe or open space, or whole scale, a real-time strategic change. Those are all examples of dialogic OD. And so, yeah, it's a long answer to that question, but it's certainly, I think it's building upon those other two waves.
Yes, that's great, Marsha. And just some of the comments from the group around waves of coaching. That because there are some new things, and I just want to call out that's not on here, but we have two beautiful webinars with Reinhard Stelter on third generation coaching that I recommend to everyone to have a look at, because he really does lay out first, second, and third generation. And as a teaser, third generation is coming to coaching as a human being, putting your own experience into it and having a deeper relationship, getting more deeply into values and the sort of the levers that are underneath the change of mindset and behavior. Some other things here that are getting integrated into coaching. One person mentions Gestalt theory, so based on the context again. More trauma right now, because trauma is so prevalent. Positive psychology, holistic and adaptive leadership, focus on physical, mental, and emotional well-being. More humanistic approach with mindfulness, values, purpose, meaning. So again, getting more at the real kind of almost evolutionary drivers of humans. You know, they've always been there, but maybe we've been a little mechanistic. I think that probably gets to most of it. Emotional intelligence, appreciative inquiry. Yeah, so I think what we're seeing here, Marsha, as this third stage in OD is more integrative and more systems, more consciousness, more awareness. That probably the same things happening in coaching.
I think absolutely. And as you were making some of those comments coming from the chat, it really does show that we are, I think, coming even closer together as two practices, and especially around the values. And I think that what both Bush and Marsha are saying is that mindset, you know, what is the mindset that you bring both to OD? And I would suggest, what is the mindset that you bring to coaching? And Margaret, what I'm just hearing you say is that, you know, it's those underlying values and that understanding of human systems. So thanks for sharing that. And for our listeners or our participants who would be interested in those two webinars that you were talking about, they could come to the IOC website actually and find those, right?
That's right. Yes.
Wonderful.
We'll
wonderful.
make sure that they're in the chat. Good.
Wonderful. Great. And so some evolving perspectives and trends in terms of coaching. And this, again, is from my perspective. You know, as I mentioned to you, one of the silver linings for me this past year during the pandemic is that time to kind of step back and to do some reflection. And so as a result of being in my relationship with my supervisor. And so what I'm sharing with you here are just some evolving perspectives from my perspective. And what I would really love is that, you know, the audience also share their what they have, you know, seen as evolving perspectives and trends in coaching. And I think Margaret just shared some of those. But one is that, you know, there's this, with me at least, I have really increased my exploration of neuroscience findings to identify the links among mindsets and behaviors and the skills best suited for adaptive performance in the VOCA world. And the reason why I have this person's name, Ashma Batul, at the end is that this person was able to, this individual was able to actually put into words what I couldn't put into words, but I knew that I was exploring. And as you can see down at the very bottom of the slide, the source was innovations in leadership coaching, research and practice. And in his article, the impact of neuroscience and mindfulness in coaching leaders in a VOCA context just really resonated with me. And so that's one perspective that, you know, I continue to explore and try to figure out, how do I apply this to coaching? Another is recognition of the complexity of each individual client. And you know, Margaret, what you were just talking about in terms of, you know, just that whole notion of the human and how the individual is in a constant state of differentiation and adaptation, of emergence from embeddedness, of creating an object of what was subject and is observable. And both Clancy and Beckett in the same book, but they kind of opened my eyes in their article, Searching for the Soul and Finding Self. And so for those of you who practice a more ontological coaching, you know, this probably resonates with you immensely. And for those of you who also, like me, who maybe are looking at the work of some of the people who have introduced us to vertical development, this also probably resonates with you. And I have to tell you, I am just still such a student of both vertical development as well as ontological coaching. Another area that I found myself exploring this year was, you know, emotional intelligence, and especially that whole idea of working effectively with clients to increase their emotional awareness and abilities to manage feelings, to better, you know, to negotiate with other people, to collaborate and to resolve conflicts. And, you know, Knickerbocker and Jones, again, and I keep on mentioning this one book, but Innovations in Leadership Coaching, Research and Practice is just full of wonderful, wonderful research that coaches have contributed. And so what they have done is they have basically talked about a new approach for coaching clients and emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence has been around for a while. And as coaches, a lot of us do use this. On the other hand, you know, they introduce new approaches because we are clearly recognizing how important that self-management is, especially in times of crises like we've been experiencing this past year. My appreciation for that leader coaching can be a catalyst for transforming culture. Which when we talk about culture, we're talking about those assumptions and beliefs and values and those behavioral norms. And this was pointed out by Robinson in her article in the book, The Leadership Coach as a Catalyst for Cultural Transformation. And that really had significant appeal to me, because as a coach, I am always thinking about, okay, how can I add value, help the client add value to the organization that they're in. So it's not just, you know, coaching that individual, but I look at myself as coaching the individual so that they can impact the rest of their group, their team, and the organization. And I think that that's kind of the OD that's still in me. It goes back to that whole notion of recognizing that individual is embedded in a much more complex system, but potentially has the opportunity to make a difference. And as coaches, we have the opportunity to support them in making a difference. And of course, Francine Capone in her article, Coaching in Wonderland, reminds us that, you know, we have to look at being ongoing learners. You know, coaches, we must commit to a rigorous and sustained practice of reflective learning. And that's what I had the opportunity to do this past year. And I'm hoping that as things begin to, you know, I'm not going to say get back to normal, because I don't know if there's such a thing as getting back to normal, but I'm going to say that as we are emerging into a new normal, that's something that I'm not going to lose. And that is taking that time to continue to immerse myself in rigorous and sustained reflective learning, to continually look at my own coaching practice, to make a difference in the client world. So I'm just kind of curious, based upon what I've just said. You know, here's another polling question, and that is, as a coach, I regularly review research specific to coaching, to, you know, gain new knowledge and develop evidence-based practices. And I think that as you all are answering this question, you know, I think that one of the structures that IOC has put in place is really that opportunity to gain new knowledge and to really to reflect on your reflect on your coaching. There have been so many different opportunities for me to tap into the IOC resources that I have never had before. And so look at this. It says here 88% say yes, and 12% say no. And so that is really impressive there, in terms of folks really being lifelong learners and recognizing that what you may have learned in school is what you learned in school. But as you continue to become a coach and mature as a coach, you recognize that it's going to be an ongoing learning in terms of enhancing your coaching practice. So some more trends, and this comes more from trends not so much associated with how you practice coaching, but on the other hand, how is the organization or the client system perhaps using or utilizing coaches? And, you know, if those of you who are interested, Coach Source does a wonderful job in every couple of years of actually going out and asking some questions around executive coaching. And so their executive report 2020 is actually available on their website. If anybody's interested, I mean, they can go and they can download it. It's called the Executive Report. And there are a lot of interesting findings in terms of the perception of coaching, both internal as well as external. And so I just kind of picked out some. And one of them is that, you know, one of the things that they found out was that the main request for coaching, at least right now, based upon the responses of the raters that were involved in their surveys, is that a lot of the leaders are interested in developing their executive presence, emotional intelligence, which we were just talking about, their ability to influence others, and communication skills. Now we know that each one of these by itself is a study. So for example, when I have a client that comes to me and says, well, I need to improve my executive presence. You know, I kind of blank and think, okay, so what are we talking about here when we say executive presence? Because like coaching and like OD, there are so many definitions for executive or leadership coaching. And some of it actually, as you all as coaches know, it kind of actually includes emotional intelligence and your ability to influence others and your communication skills, just how you show up. But these are the 4 areas that Coach Source found that are the most requested in their report. Another finding is that 3 predicted trends in the industry that folks are going to actually be using coaching more for include leadership development programs with additional coaching. And I don't know about some of you, but I am actually experiencing that. I'm getting a lot more requests to be a coach as a member of a leadership development program. And so organizations are definitely stepping up the coaching that they're using as part of their programs. Also, leader as coach training. In other words, teaching coaching skills to leaders, especially as leaders are beginning to examine their leadership style, and they really are wanting to include coaching leadership style as part of their flexibility, or I should say agility to respond. And of course, team coaching. And many of you perhaps are team coaches, and that has just really taken off, as well as group coaching. And to be quite honest with you, when team and group coaching began to emerge, one of the questions that I kind of asked myself was, is this going to be a tension point between coaches and organization development practitioners? Because I know before becoming a coach, I did, interventions at the team or the group level in the organization. As a matter of fact, that's where I considered the greatest power as far as leveraging change, was at that team and coaching level. And I was sharing with Margaret before the webinar that as an OD practitioner, to be quite honest with you, when I went back to Fielding Graduate University for coaching, I didn't go back to get a coaching certificate. I actually went back because as an OD consultant, I didn't think I was having the right conversations with senior leaders and executives. I just thought, there has to be more to this conversation than what I am having. And so I went back to Fielding to actually enhance my coaching skills so that I could actually have better conversations. However, about 6 months into the program, it was really kind of funny. I was sharing with another student that I really had no intentions of becoming a coach. And the program director at that time, who happened to be Lenny Wildflower, and she happened to be eavesdropping, I guess. And she pulled me aside and she said, Marsha, she said, did I just hear you say that you weren't going to become a coach? So I said, no, I said, that's what you heard. I really am, I'm here in the program because I want to learn coaching skills. So she says, well, she says, what makes you think that you can't become a coach? And my little tiny mind, my little tiny brain at that time, for whatever reason, I just could not see how I could integrate coaching into my consulting toolkit. Now, don't ask me how I got there, but somehow or the other. And so we sat down and we had a conversation. And she said, Marsha, she says, think about it. She says, well, first of all, she says, very seldom do most people come to OD or coaching just, right out of college. You're bringing your different backgrounds and education. And so the entry level for OD and coaching is different. And she says, and I want you to really contemplate how you can actually integrate both, how you can be both an OD consultant and a coach. And I'm so very, very glad that she really made me think about this. Otherwise, I don't know if if today I would be practicing coaching. Now, maybe somebody else would have helped me have this kind of, aha moment, but she really helped me, and I was so fortunate. But it was interesting because this area of intervening at the team or the group level is both now an area that OD consultants are hanging out in, as well as coaches. And so we have to kind of think about how can we do this together? How can we work together in terms of side by side? Hey, Margaret, I see you popping back up.
So yeah, so Marsha, I'm wondering, this would be helpful to me and it might be helpful to others.
Mm-hmm.
Could you take like a particular like situation
Mm-hmm.
that you're dealing with either as an OD consultant and a coach and describe how each would look at the situation,
Mm-hmm.
both maybe differently and complementarily?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I can give you one situation that I'm actually involved in right now. And it's a situation where a client came to me. She's a senior leader in higher education and just having significant challenges with her team, with the team. And so she wanted me to do an intervention at the team level. And what I recognized was that this could be a twofold intervention that, because I couldn't necessarily just do an intervention, or I could, but I didn't want to do an intervention at the team level because in talking to her, I recognized that there was an opportunity as well for her to become even more effective as a leader. And even if we created change at the team level, that she was still going to also have to begin to reflect on her current way of showing up as a leader and being able to change. And so what I have done, and I have never done this before, but I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating approach. And I am going to go and I'm going to be the executive coach for her. And I've brought in another coach who is actually going to coach the team. And I will have opportunity to access and observe her within the team at certain times, but the other executive coach will also, she'll be working with the team, and there will be times when we will come together and compare and work together to see, okay, how is it going? How is my coaching having an impact on this leader, so that she in turn is going back into the team and able to show up differently? And how is the team coach, what is her impact, her coaching impact having in terms of actually impacting the rest of the organization? And so we're looking at this from a multidimensional perspective, which, I have never done this before. And both of us are just really excited about this approach that we are taking. Because as you well know, we oftentimes as coaches, we go in and it's a one-on-one. And we don't necessarily think about how to, and I'll be talking about this in a few minutes, but we don't necessarily talk about it from the perspective of how can we have a ripple effect in terms of not just focusing on that person sitting across from you, from me, but also how my coaching that person can have an impact on the rest. And now I'm bringing in someone else so that she in turn can intervene from a coaching perspective to have an impact on a team. And our hypothesis is that that team is going to go out and impact organizational members in a much more positive way, so that overall this particular unit is going to be able to optimize its performance.
Yeah, that's terrific, Marsha. That's a really good example of both. It makes me think that coaches almost need basics in OD, and OD consultants, advisors need basics in coaching, right? And then use our strengths, leverage our strengths in collaboration. And I want to add one more thing, and I know you've got more to come, but I want to mention Naveen from South Africa talks about a situation of historical inequity between white and non-white
Mm.
predisposes organizations to all kinds of prejudices and adversarial feelings cleaved on wealth, culture, language, and race. So subliminal conflict, all kinds of stuff. You don't need to answer it right now, but then how would one attack? Sorry, that's probably too aggressive a word. How would one address this using both perspectives? So maybe you're coming to looking at equity inclusion, but so that's a
Well,
really good example of needing internal shifts for the individual as well as organizational shifts.
yeah, and Margaret, you may be able to help me with this one because you and I both, over the past year, and you have been, I have such admiration for you because, you stepped out last summer and asked the question, okay, how are we going to address what is going on? And when I say what's going on, we're talking about the George Floyd murder. And you brought together a group of folks, coaches, to have these conversations. And even though you did not necessarily know which direction it was going to go, you knew that something had to emerge from our conversations. And that in a way, without you even probably recognizing it, you were doing an OD intervention from a dialogic perspective, because when we all came together, there were these conversations that occurred. And eventually it enlightened you to the point where we have now, or I shouldn't say we, you have taken it to that next level in terms of IOC. So that was not this big proclamation that IOC made about its dedication to, diversity and equity and inclusion and belongingness, but it was through that action that IOC has now begun to look at how do we help coaches enter into that. And one of the things, and I didn't put it here in the trends, but what has happened based upon the Coach Source 2020 report is that a number of organizations are actually expecting their coaches to have some knowledge in that arena. Because of what is going on in organizations. And so if you show up in an organization as a coach and you haven't really taken the time to, first of all, to examine some of your own experiences and biases and even knowledge, both the theory as well as what's going on around you from that particular perspective, then I just don't know how effective you might be, especially if you're going into an organization that's having these kinds of struggles. And I don't know of hardly any organization that you're going to walk into and you're not going to find this kind of tension between the dominant and the non-dominant group, the in group and the out group. Yes. Okay. And the whole notion of power imbalance. And as coaches, we probably need to be better at recognizing. And oftentimes, and it's unfortunate because we are sitting across from our client, and we may be seeing the organization, or at least their particular group or unit, a business unit, through their lens, through their eyes. And so sometimes we are, well, most of the time, we are getting their version of what's going on. And so how do we now, going back to data, how do we collect enough data that would suggest that, okay, the leader, and I'm talking about this now from a leader perspective because I happen to be a leader coach. Okay, the leader is seeing the dynamics in his or her unit one way, but the stakeholders who are working in this particular unit are seeing it very, very differently.
Yeah. Yeah, Marsha, what you really have, I think, brought out for me, and maybe others listening are getting this too, that the starting point for organization change and development is conversation. I mean, that's really what you're
Yes.
pointing out, that it's not some big statement from on high and a billboard like this is who we are and this is where we're going. It's not vision, it's actually starting conversations and then continuing the conversations and just letting them, just like leaning in and keeping them going. And then out of that comes initiatives, right? And then now people are doing stuff. So you go from conversing to doing. So I'm really glad you pointed that out, because I think it seems so hard, right? It seems so hard to tackle these things. And starting conversations is really what we have. And coaches are able to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
what we probably need to be more awake to is the systems consciousness, right? And what are the impacts? Because I think it's very easy just to only see so far how what you're implementing and or impacting, and when you realize no, you can do more than that. So thank you. That's
Oh,
nicely.
beautifully, beautifully said. And to the person from South Africa, thank you for raising that, because oftentimes um, that is kind of the an underlying tension or concern, and nobody talks about it. And so I think that that whole notion of recognizing that you do have power inequities that has to do with the dominant and non-dominant group. And the question then becomes, who are you coaching? Are they a member of the dominant group, or
Mhm.
are they a member of the non-dominant group? And when I've had a couple of folks who when we're talking about coaching, and they tell me, well, I don't see race. And I'm thinking to myself, you don't see race when you are, the person sitting across from you happens to be of a different identity, uh, or you don't see sexual orientation, or you don't see religion, or you. So part of what I have started doing as part of my coaching, during our initial coaching sessions, is identity mapping. Social. And I think you and I have talked about this,
Mhm.
because it helps me, going back to our earlier notion of appreciating someone as human, and looking at them holistically. And so part of what I have been doing for the last couple of years, and this actually started way before, this whole this racial awakening that we're been experiencing this past year. But even before that time, it occurred to me that if I indeed was going to really be able to engage with that person sitting across from me in a holistic way, I had to acknowledge that they were coming into this with more than one identity.
Yeah, and I think that, Marsha, that also speaks to the fact that there's also there's the development word is actually one thing, something that can be staged, and each stage, like Bob Keegan
Mm,
would say, can be welcomed and not made wrong, right? That and I think what the those of you who've done the intercultural inventory training and use, that's one of the assessments out there. What I took away from that, and I think, Marsha, there's a group of us that have been experiencing this, is that people do go from a place of being naive to differences, just naive. They didn't grow up around it.
mhm,
So,
mhm,
like I remember as a child on the farm as a kid thinking, well, African people are from Africa, and Chinese people are from China, and I mean, you just
mhm,
don't know, right?
mhm,
And then you get to seeing differences, and then identity development, and now you're like that, you get polarized, and then you try to overcome that, and you harmonize. You say, oh, let's all be, well, we'll look at the common good here. Let's look at the core. And then the next stage is to both understand that and also see the differences,
mm.
and then welcome them and be able to really integrate them. And I think that's the opportunity for all of us, is to be accepting of those different stages organizationally and individually, and then help everybody move like in readiness to change just a little bit up. right? Just a little more.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would recommend that as coaches, that could be part of our own personal growth in the individual development, intercultural development inventory is a wonderful tool just to alert you to where you are stage wise, but also to now give you an opportunity to begin to, how do I move from this stage to a higher stage? So that's going to impact my coaching in a very different way.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
great.
so that was a
So
great
that's the
question.
real intersection, right?
Oh,
Now we've got race and organization development, culture development, and individual development. And this brings me to coming back to OD. There was a comment from Barbara here. So much demand, I can no longer keep up as a full-time professor now and OD consultant. Okay, so every executive I know expects this competency. Every executive.
interesting.
So I think that it's almost as though if you're a coach, you're expected to know something about this. So I just wanted to put that out there because what you're bringing to us is probably much more something that we all need to know
Mhm.
than to say delegate it just to the OD experts.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I did a panel discussion, as a matter of fact, last summer in honor of Juneteenth, and Coach Source actually sponsored this panel discussion, and we were talking about what exactly what we've just been talking about a few minutes ago, and this was a year ago, uh, and so uh, this particular area is, as when we talk about coaching trends and perspectives, this is certainly an area that the coaching practitioners are going to have to explore because it can be a powerful intervention, not just from a coaching perspective, but also from an OD perspective, especially if you know that the organization itself is on this journey. And so how do you now help the individual who's part of this journey to show up differently?
Yeah, very good.
And another finding coming out of the Coach Source report is that, you know, organizations who do link, and this kind of surprised me, that a lot of organizations still do not link coaching to outcome or to business results. But for those who do, there's an alignment with the business objectives and the employee engagement are the two areas that they oftentimes are looking at as linking the coaching work to the business results. And so I think that what this kind of made me aware of is that how often when I go into an organization as a coach, do I ask the question, what needs to be different after this coaching engagement? Now, I ask my clients that in terms of what needs to be different, after your coaching engagement. But how often do we actually invite the organization? And so now what I have started doing is that I have started doing that with stakeholders. What is it that you need to see different as a result of this leader having received coaching? That's part of the feedback because the leader is hopefully in a position to impact people, to influence people, and to show up in a way that's going to create optimal organizational effectiveness. And so getting this feedback from the people around the leader is kind of important. And I'm surprised that more and more organizations, and I would predict now, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would predict that organizations are going to begin to expect that coaches are able to show some type of value added as a result of the coaching intervention. And I think that Peter Hawkins does a nice job of capturing this when he's talking about coaching being value added. And so how do we as coaches actually, bring that notion in? Another thing that came out of the report is that, coaching, coach certification and group coaching are increasing. I mean, they did this same survey just a couple of years ago. And in these 2 years, both certification and coaching, as well as the group or team coaching, have increased in stature. And it's anticipated that it's going to continue to increase. Okay. So that brings us to this whole idea of how can we design evidence-based coaching as powerful OD interventions? And that's not an answer that I'm going to give you. It's more of a reflection question that I'm actually handing back to you as the coaching community. How are we as coaching practitioners, how are we going to use evidence-based coaching to have an even more impactful, have more impact on the organization and not just the individual? And there are probably some OD practitioners who are saying, "Well, wait a minute, you're kind of getting out of your lane there, aren't you?" And I would say no, because I would suggest that we should be partnering with each other. And so I have some polling questions that kind of actually ask about this. And Sue, this is one here. It says, as a coach, I inquire about change initiatives in the organization where I'm coaching. In other words, when you come into an organization, you know that you are being hired to coach the leader, but do you find out what else is going on in the organization? Also, as a coach, I am aware whether my client's coaching engagement is related to the change initiatives in the organization. Now, what Coach Source, the report in terms of the executive report shows is that less and less organizations are seeing coaching as a remedial intervention. However, what are they seeing it as? What are their expectations, especially around helping the organization to make changes? And then as a coach, I collaborate with OD consultants or change facilitators, or whatever you may want to call them, who are facilitating change initiatives in the organization. So these are 3 questions to just kind of think about. And, don't beat yourself up if you answer no to any of them.
We're still waiting on about 200 people.
Holy moly. This is so exciting that so many people have decided to take some of their precious time to join us today. And I just hope that we are capturing a lot of the comments in the chat. Having been a participant, I know that there's probably a whole parallel conversation that is going on out there in the chat room, and oftentimes a lot of just great exchange.
Marsha, while we're working on the poll, there's a good question here. I just want to pop into your mind. Now let me find it. Oh, yes. How do we coach around the fact that business structures were established by white men? And I can tell you, as a white woman leader, I remember reading this when I first arrived in the United States a little over 20 years ago. Something like 1 million women had left corporate America to do be their own entrepreneurs. And I say that I haven't seen the latest. I have not looked for the latest data, but I just remember thinking, "Oh, count me in. That's where I fit too." And so I think this question certainly resonates with those of us who are women who've been around, and then of course the millennials and the diversity of race that is so much greater now. So just park that one.
Yeah, and I may have to park that because I don't think I have a ready answer to that. And one of the reasons is because now we're talking about that this is really an opportunity for uh, a what we call an organizational intervention, and it has to do with re-examining uh, both the informal and the formal structure of the organization. And of course, the formal structure, when you when you look up, and to your point, when you look up, uh, who do you see in the senior leader, executive, and board levels? And we oftentimes know who that is. But informal is oftentimes even more deleterious, especially to organizational members. And I like to say, what's going on in the white space? Because that is oftentimes where you see the power plays. You know, in the formal structure, you definitely have power being experienced from the perspective of just plain out and out allocation of resources. And those resources, you know, go from, you know, how much time somebody spends to you to, you know, being able to change how hiring and firing occurs, or who gets rewarded, who gets recognized. But the informal is that who's invited to the golf course. You know, I was talking to a client yesterday, and she just absolutely warmed my heart because she happens to be a people manager in a large oil company, and we know how few women there are there. Okay, uh, and one of her well, her real coaching goal is to become more of a coaching leader. And so she had outlined a number of activities that she thought would help her to pursue that, to achieve that rather. And one of them was to really increase visibility of the people who work for her, the individual contributors. So one of the things that she decided to do was to actually take one of her high potential women, okay, individual contributors, and introduce them to different power players in the organization. She just, you know, walked her around and introduced her, and you know, for the whole purpose of giving her some visibility. Now, this her individual contributor is someone who has been in this organization over 15 years. Knowledgeable person, happens to be Asian America, Asian American, however, grew up in China, and has a PhD. Um, and so, you know, she's kind of a member of what would potentially be part of the odd group. And so here's another woman, okay, who's now putting on the mantle of allyship and saying, you know something, I'm going to use the power that I do have. Uh, and a lot of times that's what we forget to help members of non-dominant groups to feel, to experience, or to acknowledge is, what power do I have? Because you can easily go there in terms of what power I don't, but what power do I have? So here she was using her power to actually introduce this woman to all of the important network that she's exposed to, and has, in a sense, now created opportunities for this particular woman to now be interviewed. And to date, this woman had received like 7 invitations to interview, increasing her opportunity for upward mobility. And so when we were having our coaching session yesterday, I said to her, I said, you know, there is a name for this. And she said, I said, it's called allyship. I says, we don't necessarily use it in this context. I says, but you have used your power to now support someone else. And I says, and you know something? I says, first of all, she was in awe and surprised that you did this, but she's going to potentially go out and she's going to repeat it, because what you have done is you have role modeled what can happen when someone really is wearing a coaching hat as a leader. And she was just really, I mean, she was just ecstatic. And so I think that as women, we really and truly have that opportunity to mobilize and to really begin to change how the organization not just looks, but the dynamics in it. And that can happen through coaching, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I think we have to expand the golf course metaphor to the yoga studio and other places where people congregate.
I absolutely love it. Absolutely. And so when we look at our polling results here,
Yeah.
it says 74%, 194 folks on this call say, you know, they do inquire about change initiatives in the organization. So that is great. And the other is that 73% also say, I'm aware of my coach's coaching and engagement is related to a change initiative in the organization, and that's wonderful. And sometimes, you know, you're not aware, depending upon what the invitation. And then the number kind of goes a little bit. You know, I collaborate with OD consultants who are facilitating change initiatives in the organization. And you know, I probably should have clarified this question a little bit more, because some of you are potentially collaborating and you don't necessarily know it, because you may be collaborating with an internal OD consultant, because there are OD consultants that are internal. And so, you know, if they fall under HR, and HR can be the gatekeeper for actually bringing in consultants and coaches. And so that may be an opportunity. And that is, who's the OD consultant, the internal OD consultant? Because oftentimes they have a significant uh, 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 opportunity to work with you, and they know a lot of what's going on in the organization from a change perspective. And so don't just think about OD consultants being external. The other individual to think about, who are the internal coaches, because there are some organizations who have their internal coaches. And so who are they? And how can you tap into that particular source, especially in terms of understanding the culture? And as an OD consultant, okay, I am oftentimes, I know that I don't understand the culture. Even if I am consulting in an organization, I will never be able to appreciate the culture of an organization the way that those people who are living in that organization day in and day out. And when I'm working as a consultant, OD consultant, I will often share my role is to make the invisible visible. And I don't necessarily think that that has changed a lot when I'm working with coaches, with clients, my coaching clients. And that is, how can I make the invisible visible? And so given that, you know, when we start talking about how to really make a difference from an OD perspective, what I'd like to share with you is actually a case in point that came out of the literature, and it's called the ripple effect. And now, what you've already heard me say that, and you probably are inferring that I have a great deal of respect for evidence-based practice. And the one thing that didn't come out in my bio, but I come from a healthcare background. I grew up as a Navy nurse. But those of us who are in healthcare, we really have a lot of respect for evidence-based practice. And so I have just kind of brought that right into both my OD and my coaching, talking about our educational or our backgrounds influencing how we show up as coaches. And that's the one thing that actually does. But this was an interesting example or exemplar, I should say, that showed up when I was kind of doing some research in preparation for this webinar. And this is called the ripple effect. And I've put the article down on the slide there so that you can look it up. But, you know, Smith and his colleagues did some research around employees working in multiple on multiple teams. And what they have found out is that, and we know we have all been in what we call these multiple organizations that are using multiple teams. And so you may have one employee who is, you know, a member of 5 or 6 different teams. But what we're recognizing is that can be very, very stressful for the employee. And it really can be stressful if the team leader is not as effective. And so it says here, in most organizations, it's common to work on multiple teams at the same time. Juggling projects and tasks across teams can be stressful, but the new research shows that having a good manager on just one of those teams can have a positive effect on an employee's performance on other teams. In fact, even if an employee has a bad experience with a disempowering team leader in one of their teams, all is not lost as long as the employees belong to other teams that are led by empowering leaders. It's good practice to make sure that team leaders have the skills to support and empower their team members by giving them as much autonomy as possible. So the research was around how do you actually help leaders or increase leaders' effectiveness in terms of just around this one variable of empowerment. And so Steibel and Peabody, who are associates in a consulting group, they decided to take this particular research one step farther. And they were doing some coaching with an executive, CEO, as a matter of fact, whose leadership style was characterized as authoritarian. And so what they used was cognitive behavioral executive coaching to increase the behavioral expression of empowerment. What they actually did was that they just, had on his iPad, they had him to put on his iPad silence and devil, because he believed that silence meant that people agreed with him versus silence was just silence. And he never took the opportunity to ask for input or even disagreement when the team was meeting. And so they actually helped him to use cognitive behavioral executive coaching by just having this prompt on his iPad, so that when he looked down and he saw the word silent, it triggered in him that then urge to, okay, who's been sitting around the table and who has not talked? And so how do I invite? The other is that we all recognize the plague of groupthink. If I'm sitting around the table with an authoritarian leader, the likelihood of me actually disagreeing with that leader is highly unlikely. And so how do I now create an opportunity so that our decisions are not going to be flawed as a result of groupthink? I need a devil's advocate. So inviting someone to be a devil's advocate, to literally, that's their role, and to kind of bark at the decision. Well, guess what? Not only did he, or was he able to change his behavior, but the CFO actually noticed a change. Now, the CFO happened to be a member of this executive team. She noticed a change in the CEO's behavior. The CFO began to notice that when people on her team, as a result, were not speaking up, and then she began asking silent people to voice opinions. Well, because of the position that she was in, she had a lot of influence, okay, because it required her to participate in a lot of online meetings across the globe, okay. The concept of devil's advocate began to spread company-wide. on a, and so this, what would start out as a one-on-one coaching assignment became pretty much a global organization development intervention. And so I began to think about, wow, Marsha, I like this notion of the ripple effect, and how can I, use this research that is out there already? How can I begin to incorporate it even more into my own coaching practice so that I am actually able to achieve what I really want to, and that's having an impact beyond the person that's sitting across from me. And so I think that this is really a great exemplar of how we as coaches can scan the research out there and begin to take it and translate it into evidence that we can then begin to use at our coaching level and based upon the outcomes that are desired. And I would suggest that increasingly, we as coaches are going to be held accountable for not just impacting the person that we're coaching, but for that person to then be able to go out and have even a broader impact. For example, in this case with the CFO. And so I think that this is just a really great example of how we can use coaching as a really powerful intervention that can make significant difference. And what's oftentimes said is that, it's small changes that can have the big outcomes. And I think that we sometimes forget that. So what I'd like to leave you with is a couple of coaches, a couple of quotes. One of this is from Francis Bacon, back in 1620 now. This man said, "Let every student of nature take this as his rule, that whatever the mind seizes upon with particular satisfaction is to be held in suspicion." And so then Frances Capone at Fielding Graduate University, and she is one of the editors for this book that I just have fallen in love with, Innovations in Leadership, Coaching, Research, and Practice. She took the quote and kind of massaged it. So as coaches, we can always remember this. And she says, "What the mind seizes upon should be held with gentle suspicion and examined with bold curiosity. Curiosity is at the heart of all good coaching. Curiosity about the client, curiosity about self as coach, curiosity about the situation, curiosity about the processes and the practices itself." And so I'm hoping that, for all of you who have joined us today, that I have really just made you more curious. I just happen to believe that curiosity is a superpower. And I'm hoping that I've just made you more curious. So Margaret, any last words?
Well, Marsha, so this is a beautiful presentation, and I know you can't multitask and read all the kudos to you, but kudos to you. And I wonder, I think people will indulge us to go an extra minute. Whither goest thou? Where are you going?
Oh, wow. Where am I going? Right now I am trying to be in the here and now. And I have to give you a shout out, Margaret, in terms of helping me to stay in the here and now, and IOC as well during this past year. And so where am I going is trying to really to aspire to meet my own demands for having a bigger impact as a coach beyond just that person sitting in front of me.
Wow. Yes. So open the horizons. I can see a tree emerging, a
Yes.
big, beautiful tree.
Yes,
Well, just lots of love and appreciation. You just I don't know if we want to use a baseball metaphor after the golf course, knocking it out of the park. But anyway, you did. And I think let's plant this seed. Let's do more to bring together OD and coaching.
That would be absolutely beautiful.
Set that intention. Great.
Yes, indeed.
Well, thank you, everyone. We had almost more than 500 people at the height of this session, Marsha. That just, and it's a summer day, right? So people are actually could be on the beach. So thank you so much, and the beginning of more conversations.
And I'd like to give a special shout out as well to our 2 Zoom masters.
Good job.
Sue, who does an outstanding job, and of course, we have another Zoom master. Where is he?
Austin?
Austin. Austin is sitting out there in Seattle right now in 95-degree weather and no air condition. So Austin, please, thank you as well. So I always like to say thanks to all of the Zoom masters who support us.
Good. Onward, everybody.
Thanks a lot.